back to the United Stand. On today's show, we are joined with Ben Jacobs to give us all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news. Ben, thank you for making time to join us once again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always enjoy chatting.
Yes, I'm very, very excited to speak to you, Ben. So first and foremost, I mean, you probably get asked this all the time at the moment, but I want to get into Erik Ten Hag's future. To your knowledge, what is the update on Erik Ten Hag, and do we know when a decision will be made by INEOS and Manchester United?
I think we'll get clarity before the week is out today, tomorrow. I don't think it's going to take too much longer. My understanding is that it's been a comprehensive end of season review. So we're not talking about anything predetermined, whether he stays or goes. And INEOS are looking dispassionately. And by that, I don't mean they don't care. Sometimes people misconstrue what that word means, but they're trying to remove the emotion from the decision. Don't get sucked in by the high of winning the FA Cup. Don't necessarily only look at the low of the lowest ever Premier League finish. It's the whole season, and it's also a projection on the future. Is Ten Hag the right football personality and strategic fit for next season? Because the tools at his disposal, the model backing the manager, it's all changing from now. And Omar Barada's not even in yet officially, nor is Dan Ashworth. So if you get rid of somebody now and then build the foundations, you might regret it. But usually when a new model is built, there's so many changes that sometimes the manager that transitioned between old and new model isn't the right fit simply because they weren't picked by the new people. So the review is almost about whether or not Ten Hag, thinking about the future, and were he to hypothetically be interviewed for his own vacancy, would be the one that would get it. And I'm told they're split, and that Jean-Claude Blanc, for example, wants to keep Ten Hag, or is putting that argument forwards as part of a healthy debate. And Dave Brailsford has played the devil's advocate position. And they've done that intentionally to make sure that when they finally come to a determination in the next day or two, nobody can say that they've left any stone unturned. And that's why it's taking relatively long. But Ten Hag wants to know now, because he feels if he doesn't know by the end of this week, then one, he can't start planning, and two, he can't start looking for another job in the market.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting situation. One that, I mean, I can't really remember when in football we had a situation like this where the season was over and there was literally a situation where the board at a club are deliberating for this long on the future of a manager. And with Erik Ten Hag, we were quite certain that he was going to go after the FA Cup. Obviously, he's won that. And now we're in a situation where we're not sure which way it's going to go. So thank you so very much for the update on that. I'm sure a lot of the viewers at home will be absolutely loving the fact that we could get a decision sooner rather than later. Just off a feeling, do you think it's leaning any way at the moment?
I think it was a 50-50 call before, and it's a 50-50 call after, which means that the odds haven't gone up or down because of the FA Cup win. And cynics will say they always wanted to get rid of him. They won the FA Cup. They've got to leave it a little bit of time, and then they'll announce he's going. And if that happens, then it's hard to disprove in many ways, because anyone that said he was going beforehand can always say, look, it's consistent with where we thought things were going. But I'm not so sure, simply because there are people within the senior hierarchy that back Ten Hag. So this is genuinely about a healthy disagreement that will eventually come to consensus, and sooner rather than later, which is why as a journalist, I'm not prepared to put a prediction on it, because things are moving so rapidly and it's such a fluid process and it's such an in-depth process. It's not just about people's opinions. They're looking at data and they're looking at the season at large, and they're using that data to project on next season and the season afterwards. Because one thing that has been said in the review already is that Ten Hag's the only manager since Alex Ferguson to win trophies in back-to-back seasons. And if you add the injuries, and if you add the inconsistencies, and if you add various off-field issues and dramas, remember when he arrived, Cristiano Ronaldo at that point was almost overshadowing Ten Hag based on his own future playing out so publicly. He's had to deal with Marcus Rashford's form dipping and the nightclub incident. He's had to deal with the very sensitive issue of Mason Greenwood. He's had to play Casemiro at centre-back. So what would Ten Hag be like if people buy into the full philosophy with a fit football squad and with a recruitment plan over what I'm told is the next 5 windows? So 3 summers and 2 Januaries. That's phase 1. And if Ten Hag stays and has already won 2 trophies, how many more can he win, and can he qualify for Champions League? And I think the people listening will also be 50-50 as to whether the right man is Ten Hag or not. But what's important to say is that if they are going to make a change, they have to be ready. So the succession planning is underway. And succession planning doesn't mean Ten Hag's going. It means it's a well-run club by people that realise if they get rid of Ten Hag, they can't have managerial limbo, because pre-season's already kind of on the horizon. And that's where the links with Tuchel, Pochettino, Potter and so on come from. Not because it's a clue he's definitely going, but just if there's a likelihood a change may need to be made, Manchester United need to have somebody ready to replace Ten Hag very quickly.
In terms of, I was just literally about to ask you about that, and thank you so much for the update. It's really interesting to hear. In terms of if Ten Hag was to be sacked as Manchester United manager, obviously at the moment we don't know, it could go either way. But is there a top candidate to replace him? I mean, what are you hearing about who could potentially replace Erik Ten Hag if he was to leave the football club?
So I'm hearing Southgate was always overblown, and part of that was due to the links between Southgate and Ashworth, and Southgate can't walk into a football club quickly either. So anyone at the Euros for any managerial gig is at a slight disadvantage, because clubs will try and get a new manager in as soon as possible rather than have to wait until the Euros has finished. Then we have Graham Potter and Thomas Tuchel and Maurizio Pochettino, and some sources say Zinedine Zidane, although I'm not of the belief that he would be a front runner, but I do think they might hold a conversation with him. And much like Chelsea, I think Manchester United will be looking for somebody that has experience in English football, which means that the other 3 names I mentioned would be high in their thinking. With Kieran McKenna, he's not going to wait for a potential Manchester United vacancy. The expectation is he's going to sign a new long-term deal with Ipswich and become one of the best 10 paid managers in the Premier League, earning potentially as high as 5 million a year, which is incredible. But obviously there'll be outs that allow him to join Champions League clubs or so-called big clubs under certain circumstances. So maybe Ipswich are paying him more money now because they know that he may end up leaving in the near future. So you can afford to give him a long-term deal, because it probably won't run its full course if McKenna's trajectory goes according to plan. So then you're left with Tuchel, Pochettino, Potter. And Maurizio Pochettino's got a lot of admirers within Manchester United, and the same with Potter. Both men were looked at by INEOS for Nice. So there's a backstory there, and they know Pochettino well. And Pochettino would take the Manchester United job, I'm told. He wants to get straight back into football, and he would have no reservations, nor do Manchester United have any reservations about Pochettino's time at Chelsea. And that's obviously the same for Graham Potter as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the talk regarding the succession planning. But neither of them have been interviewed at this point, because there is that clear distinction we have to make between succession planning and interviewing. And then with Tuchel, the Tuchel side is he wants to go to Manchester United. He feels he's got unfinished business within the Premier League. If it was up to Tuchel, he would near automatically say yes to Manchester United. And some at Bayern have got a conspiracy theory that he's known there's going to be a vacancy and he forced his way out of Bayern and chose not to renew, even though they got rid of him, and then they nearly had a U-turn. And Bayern feel that Tuchel didn't sign up again because he thought there was going to be a vacancy at Manchester United and he would be a front runner. But what I would say is that Pochettino and Potter are seen by those within Manchester United as better personality and strategic fits. But Tuchel is a world-class football coach and a Champions winner. So again, it's going to come down to the kind of coach they want. Either one head coach to fit the model, or a more experienced serial winner who wears his heart on his sleeve, but fights a bit more, falls out a bit more, And there is some due diligence for Manchester United to do on Tuchel regarding what happened at Chelsea and then what happened at Bayern Munich. And this is why it's not a slam dunk scenario that Tuchel becomes the automatic favourite because he's a free agent and because everyone knows he wants the job. But I'd imagine if there is a vacancy that Pochettino, Potter, Tuchel will all be names that get interviews.
Yeah, I was looking at the names actually to replace Erik Ten Hag, and all of them three are the ones that are kind of being put out there in the media at the moment and the ones that seem available. And me, just personally, I mean, speaking to the audience that are watching live with us now, and I know as a journalist you can't have an opinion on this, but I see all three candidates and I compare them to Erik Ten Hag, and I think Erik Ten Hag's personally a better fit and a better manager. So getting rid of Ten Hag and replacing them with one of them three, to me personally, wouldn't make sense. If, for example, if Erik Ten Hag was never at Manchester United and he was a candidate for the jobs now alongside the other candidates, I think he'd be the one that everyone would want to be the manager. So it's going to be really interesting, like you say, when this decision comes out, which way it's going to go, because I'm sure, as you've seen, the Manchester United fan base are going to have something to say about it. I'd say the majority are still behind Erik now, and there's not that clear replacement that, you know, for example, when Van Gaal went, Mourinho was there, everyone was loving that. When Ole Gunnar Solskjaer went, we knew that it was either going to be Erik Ten Hag or Pochettino, and you could see that there was a replacement there. This time round, it doesn't really feel like that for Manchester United. I mean, INEOS taking notice of the noise from the outside, and also as well, I wanted to quickly ask you before we move on to recruitment, I mean, what's the players' feelings towards Erik Ten Hag right now, have you heard?
Well, I think the players' feelings are diverse. If you ask, for example, Jadon Sancho, who may end up coming back to Manchester United if a deal isn't agreed with Dortmund, one would presume, would prefer to return under a different manager. Otherwise, there's probably no way forward there. So players are impacted by, are they going to play? And if it's under a manager that they're playing regularly for, then of course they want that manager to stay. A lot of the Chelsea players loved Pochettino, but they're equally excited by Maresca. So in a weird way, most players' opinions don't matter in this context because they're not in the room. Mm-hmm. But what I am told is that INEOS are seeking feedback as part of this review from several of the senior players. So the players will have a voice in the review. And Ten Hag's not the only person being reviewed. They're reviewing everything on the football side at this point. And then that will culminate in a decision on Erik Ten Hag. I think that with these kind of situations, the fan sentiment has to be listened to, because you're crazy as an owner if you disassociate yourself with the fans. But INEOS want to be dispassionate. And dispassionate doesn't mean don't care. It means looking at things scientifically and analytically, and not only getting sucked in by the very highs and the very lows. And I think with the fan base, if you go 2 weeks before the FA Cup final, or if they'd have lost the FA Cup final to Manchester City, the vast majority of the fan base, even if they had sympathy for Ten Hag, would probably be saying, we need a change. It's our lowest Premier League finish. It was embarrassing away at Crystal Palace. Even the Coventry game that they won was horrific, allowing them back into that game. And it may be down to injuries. It may be down to other things that are not only in Ten Hag's control. So we have to understand the context. But if they hadn't won the FA Cup, then I don't think there would be that much of a pro Ten Hag staying outcry. Now Manchester United have won the FA Cup. People say momentum is important. That's what we can play like. We've just beaten the Premier League winners and our City rivals. Surely he gets a little bit more time. So the fan sentiment is passion driven, as you would expect, and it changes day on day on day on day. Whereas INEOS and the leadership team within Manchester United, of course, appreciate that it might be quite popular now if they keep Ten Hag, but they have to think about the long-term future of the football club and try and take the passion out of the equation and decide not based upon popular opinion, but who is going to be the best fit strategically for the football club. And that's why it's probably taken so long. And that's why it's a relatively hard decision to make, because you can argue it both ways.
Yeah, I think basically what INEOS are going to be doing then is taking the emotion out of the decision. And at the moment, obviously, the fan base are, to be honest with you, from on our side, in our community, I can speak for what I've seen here, and also obviously I go to the games. I think the support for Erik Ten Hag has been there the whole way through the season, even in the lowest of the lows, because I think the fan base understand, you know, like we were talking about before, what he's had to deal with behind the scenes. We have got a few super chats in, Ben. Mario Franco says, Erik Ten Hag said the review was completed. Given that he still has a contract, doesn't this mean INEOS do not need to announce anything at all if he stays? And then we also have another one saying why negatives always outweigh the positives. It's human nature to look at the bad side of people. And Soleil says, I'm Erik Ten Hag out, but no to Tuchel, Poch or De Zerbi. And the Red Army Stand TV says, Erik Ten Hag in. So again, you've got difference of opinions in the super chats. But in terms of that, really quickly, Ben, Erik Ten Hag was speaking publicly, like Mario said, saying that he was told he was going to be the guy they'd move forward with. He thought the review was done. And now we're in a situation where the review is taking place, the end of season review. Do you expect there to be an announcement whether Erik stays or obviously if he leaves there'll be an announcement, but do you expect there to be clarification from Manchester United on that?
I don't think there'll necessarily be a public statement if he stays, but I think it will be clear he's staying through the media.
Yeah.
We're asking them every day, sometimes more than one time every day. So when a decision's made, the decision likely will be informed to media, and then we'll be in a position to report that based upon our sources. I think the only scenario we might see a form of public announcement is if Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's been very media friendly and visible, is prepared to speak through the club and reflect on the season. And if he does, there may be an allusion from the ownership saying we've carried out a thorough review of every department. It's not just about Ten Hag and football. They're looking at the media department, the commercial department, everything. And that's part of when you take over control, even though they've technically only got sporting control, you have to assess everything and work out where you need to improve. So we might see Sir Jim Ratcliffe speak on record and allude to the review, and if Ten Hag stays, why they've decided to keep him. But we'll have to wait and see. But I've absolutely no doubt if he goes, there's obviously a formal club press release. If he stays, then they're not just going to do nothing and then he's going to turn up for pre-season and everyone's going to go, oh, that's their decision. Trust me, there's enough of us hounding them day on day, second on second, minute on minute. I feel sorry for media departments and sources as well, because, you know, even though we're working as ourselves or for our outlets, you know, because we're friends, we're in groups, we talk to each other, you know, sometimes that we're all bugging the same people. So they must be getting hundreds and hundreds of messages every single day. And eventually, if he stays, one of us, if not all of us, will get a clear-cut answer. So we will find out soon enough.
Yes, I'm excited to find out, because personally I want Erik Ten Hag to stay, but I just also want to know a decision just so we can move on with the summer and talk about transfers and talk about recruitment, which is what I'm going to move on to now. I mean, Ben, there's been a lot of talk recently that Manchester United don't have a lot of money in this transfer window, restrictions with financial fair play. I mean, to your knowledge, what sort of budget is Manchester United working with this summer, do you reckon?
Well, I think the budget will be dependent upon how much money they can bring in. So we spoke about this last time. Manchester United don't have much more than 80 million max. Some say the number is close to 50 million. And that puts them in the same position as a year ago, where, if you may remember when I came on, I said they want two quick signings for, at that point, under 100 million. And it was Mason Mount and Andre Onana. And then everything else is either spending beyond what you wanted to or selling in order to buy. So if Manchester United want Michael Olise, then everything else is going to have to wait. If Manchester United want Jareth Branthwaite, then everything else is going to have to wait. But the other thing is that the incomings will be dependent, not just for money, but for positions on who goes. So if it is Casemiro and or Christian Eriksen, and it's not even unthinkable that they might entertain an offer for Scott McTominay. If it's the midfield that are the first few, that depart, then midfield becomes a big priority. If it was, even though he was brilliant, I thought last season, Harry Maguire, along with Rafael Varane departing, it becomes centre-back that you're looking for as a priority. Anthony Martial has gone. Were they to entertain an offer for Anthony if Rashford left? I don't think it's likely, because ultimately he only signed a new deal relatively recently. But if they did decide that an incredible offer came in, then again, you're looking at that goal-scoring, creative-minded, wide-type forward or winger. And if nothing happens first and they decide they need a target, then I still think they'll be looking at a traditional striker to support Rasmus Højlund. So it's chicken and egg, because as soon as someone goes, not only do you get a bit of money in, but you have a gap in your squad, and that will define the priority position that Manchester United try and move in first.
Would you say that's why Elise is a massive target for us right now, because it looks like Sancho and Greenwood are going to go? Obviously on the right wing section for Manchester United, I know we've not seen him in a United shirt for a long time, but you know, if they both depart, then that would give them the budget to bring in Elise. Is that the way it's kind of going to work?
Yeah, because it's a long window, they don't have to wait for the sale physically. They just have to know the sale is going to happen, so they can plan for it and they can offset it on their books, so they won't be in any kind of hot water. And remember, we're talking about two deadlines: 30th of June for the financial year under PSR, and then 31st of December under UEFA's financial fair play. So for financial fair play, you've got the whole of the summer, but for PSR, if there are any concerns for this financial year, then you're looking at that 30th of June cutoff. You can go beyond it by a couple of weeks, as long as you can show that it's a so-called near miss. In other words, if you were negotiating, if the deal was looking likely approaching that deadline, if the deal sheet's not signed off until after it, you can still make a case that that should go on the financial books for this financial year. And as you say, there's a high likelihood that Greenwood goes. I know Sir Jim Ratcliffe is on record as saying that they're still deciding, but I think it'd be very difficult and sensitive for them to bring him back to Manchester United Football Club. And there is interest, including from the Premier League. On top of that, Sancho wants to stay at Dortmund. Dortmund's priority, though, their number one target is getting Ian Maatsen over the line for under the 35 million release clause that Chelsea have stipulated, so maybe 30 million. And then they'd love Sancho as well. And I'm told Manchester United's price is around about 50 million for him. So just for those two alone, Dortmund would be spending 85 million, but they're a Champions League finalist. They've got Champions League next season. They sold Jude Bellingham. The money should be there, but they're trying to haggle. And they may make the argument to Manchester United they can't afford Maatsen and Sancho and they want him lower. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We're also going to have to wait and see on whether there's a new manager, because if Ten Hag departs, then Sancho doesn't have a problem with Manchester United. So maybe we see a twist, and if Dortmund can't get a deal over the line, maybe he does decide to come back to Manchester United and fight for his place in pre-season if, and it is an if, there is to be a new manager. So there's a lot up in the air there. But I think Michael Elise, as I've said many times, is a target that has been approved by the old regime and the new regime. And there's only two clubs in the race for Elise: Manchester United and Chelsea. And Manchester United at the moment are more advanced in their thinking and their contact on the Elise side than Chelsea. But Chelsea don't really need to do as much, because they've already tried to sign Elise once. They thought they triggered his old clause, but it was complicated, and eventually they backed off, and Crystal Palace even accused them of tapping up the player. So Chelsea may return, but the clause is complicated, including the mechanism for triggering it. But it's basically 60 to 65 million, that kind of ballpark. So if Manchester United go for Elise, it's a reflection that he's a priority target. And then they need to decide, is he in the singular first priority position? And if he is, they'll move fast and they'll spend the budget that they've got for now. And then they'll have to wait on outgoings or decide to overspend from the planned budget. But maybe they say, actually, there's another priority position, and as long as Chelsea don't move, Elise can wait, and we can do him in the second half of the window once we've brought in a little bit more money. But I have no doubt that Manchester United will be firmly in the conversation for Michael Elise. And from what I'm told, he wants to join Manchester United as well, given a straight choice between Chelsea and Manchester United. Players' preference is Manchester United, is my understanding. With Mikhailo Mudryk, he wanted to go to Arsenal. He ended up at Chelsea. So you can never say never. But if Manchester United have a offer accepted for Elise, or they trigger the clause, and then Elise is given a decision right now between Manchester United and Chelsea, I'm told he would pick Manchester United.
I love that. I love to hear that. I think Elise is a great player, and like you said, it'll be interesting to see if we move for him very quickly or if it is someone we wait around on, because you know what Chelsea are like in the window. Like sometimes you think you know what they're going to do, and then quickly they'll be onto something, and you don't want to be beat to that punch with that. But it'll be interesting to see how we move on Elise. But thank you very much for that update. And on Dortmund, by the way, in not paying the price, I'd say, hang on a second, we paid 73 million and you got him on loan this year, and you're in a Champions League final. You should be lining up to give us the money. But no, thank you for that update. And onto the midfield, I wanted to speak about this because we've had rumours that Christian Eriksen is going to leave Manchester United. Also rumours on Casemiro leaving Manchester United. I mean, are they two players that you expect to leave? And also, Sofyan Amrabat, do you think Manchester United will trigger that, or do you reckon he'll be back to Fiorentina or basically going to another club?
Amrabat's still being discussed. It's not impossible, but I think if they were to keep him at the football club, they might look for something a little bit different in terms of structure and format, rather than only triggering it. You look, for example, at Timo Werner, and Tottenham could have triggered the option to buy, but instead they just did a new loan with a new option to buy. And structurally and financially, that's better for Manchester United, because then again, they may not have to lay out as much money up front. I think there is a fair chance Christian Eriksen goes, but we have to wait and see whether it's Ten Hag or whether it's a new manager, because Eriksen's issue was under Ten Hag. He didn't feel he was getting enough game time. So were a new manager to come in, Eriksen would have a conversation with that manager and then we would know more, but there's a realistic chance he departs. Casemiro is nailed on to receive an offer from Saudi Arabia. And when John Murta was still running the show in early January, he went over to Saudi Arabia, to my knowledge, and he held meetings with the central Saudi deal makers. And it was clear that Casemiro was one of the players who was for sale. So Casemiro wants to, again, hear the pitch from Manchester United, the pathway if he stays, and like every other player, understand who the manager is heading into the new season. But Saudi will come to Manchester United with a formal offer. I'm told it's not going to be as high as people are suggesting. And even though it might be easy to assume the Saudis are just going to make some insane offer like they did for Mo Salah, a lot of the deals are lower, even if in the media they get hyped up, because this builds buzz and it helps the Saudi project, talking about 70, 80, 90, 100 million offers for various players. But last summer, it was only really Ruben Neves that I thought was way above the odds. Players like Edouard Mendy, Kalidou Koulibaly, Alan St-Maximin, they were lower, the actual fee, than were touted at the time. So Casemiro is being spoken of as 50, 55 million euros, but the Saudis are looking more at 30 million euros plus bonuses. And given Manchester United could get him off the wage bill, which is equally as significant, that might be something that they go for, as long as the bonuses are easily gettable. And I would keep an eye on both Al Nassr, Cristiano Ronaldo's club, and Al Hilal, the defending Saudi champions. They both have a strong interest in Casemiro. A left field club, and this could be Varane, and so could Al Ittihad, who are looking for a centre-back. Al Qadsiya, who are newly promoted. They play in Dammam, or technically Khobar, but I'm not going to confuse people by going into subsections of Saudi places, so we'll just call it Dammam for now, but apologies if any Saudis are listening. And it's right by Bahrain, and they're owned by Aramco, who obviously have got a lot of money, and it's the only football club at the moment that Aramco own. And they're trying for Jose Mourinho as manager, and because they're newly promoted, they mean business. they're trying to break the monopoly of the big PIF-controlled clubs, which is ironic because the PIF chairman is Yasser Al-Rumayyan and the Aramco chairman is Yasser Al-Rumayyan. So it is basically all the same people. But Al Qadsiya are going to have money to spend. And it would not surprise me if both Casemiro and Rafa Varane creep onto their radar, even though the most likely destination for both is one of the PIF clubs.
Honestly, if I'm Manchester United, I'm taking that money for Casemiro. I know it's maybe a little bit lower than what people would want in terms of the €30 million mark, but like you said, he's on a big contract with big wages. If you can get them off the books, I would take that, to be honest, in a heartbeat. For Casemiro, was good last year, but I think it is time for him to move on. So that would be really interesting. And in terms of replacements, have we heard anything on what names could be available to replace Casemiro, Ben?
Yeah, it's similar to what we discussed last time. You've got Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, who will be available a little bit cheaper, even though Leicester have got promoted because of their financial situation. And I think now Enzo Maresca has left for Chelsea. The player won't necessarily be as attached to the Leicester project if he feels that they can't strengthen under a new manager. And they may even start the season with a points deduction, minimum 6, but it could even go into double figures. So Brighton made an offer for Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall in January for 20 million. And Leicester dismissed it as derisory. And at the time, sources had indicated they were looking for £45 million. Now I think the price for Dewsbury-Hall will be somewhere in the middle, between 20 million and 45 million. So 30 million might be enough to get Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall because of the fact that Leicester need to sell. And that's a bargain for me, and a player that would fit in very well to Manchester United's system. And I'm sure that Brighton will be back in as well. And still the other one I'm hearing is João Gomez as well, and Manchester United retain an interest in him.
I really like João Gomez from Wolves. I think that's an interesting one, young player as well. So thank you for that. In terms of the striker, I mean, it's pretty much nailed on that Manchester United are going to go for a striker to support Rasmus Højlund. I mean, yesterday I was hearing reports of potential Manchester United looking at João Felix. I don't know how concrete that really is, but is there any other names that you can talk about in terms of a striker for Manchester United, and any clarification on João Felix as well?
Well, João Felix wants to stay at Barcelona. The problem is finances and if they can make it work. I think he's not a commodity yet that can be offered. So the feeling from Felix was something along the lines of Barca acquire and then immediately trade in order to be in the conversation for Greenwood. And I'm told that's nonsense. And that, first and foremost, Felix wants to try and stay permanently at Barcelona, as does João Cancelo. And then if he does so, he's going nowhere. Rafinha is maybe the one that's going to be spoken about, not for Manchester United, but generally in terms of Barcelona shipping players out in order to raise enough funds to get in who they need. And there is an element of substance to Greenwood to Barcelona, only in the sense they know that he's been the form player at Getafe, and idealistically, they want top players like that, but practically they can make no financial moves to pull that off. So I wouldn't read too much into João Felix being used as leverage and ending up at Old Trafford, because the player always has a say, and he really, really wants to find a way of either being loaned again or making a permanent move to Barcelona. Ivan Toney could still come into the conversation. And even though Thomas Frank said publicly he's a £100 million player, my understanding is 40 or 50 million is a realistic number that may be considered by Brentford. But Toney could stay at Brentford, not sign a new deal, and then just enter into free agency. And then maybe Manchester United come calling in 2025 rather than 2024. I would keep a very, very close eye on Benjamin Sesko. I expect Manchester United to be in that conversation. Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United, those are the three that will push. And if PSG get Victor Osimhen instead of Chelsea, it will only leave 3 Premier League options, or staying at Leipzig, which is also not beyond the realms of possibility. And then let's see whether Manchester United can persuade a player like that to come into their side who's got a high ceiling and they would feel would complement Rasmus Højlund and alleviate some of the burden on him. I know Højlund didn't finish the season in the same purple patch as in the months towards the beginning of the year when it really looked like he'd taken to the Premier League. But Manchester United have no doubts that he will continue to improve. So they're not worried anymore about finding goals because Rasmus Højlund has been hit and miss. They feel he showed enough across the whole season and in that specific purple patch that they can buy younger now and have someone that needs a season themselves in order to develop and come through. But there's two kind of considerations and profiles there. One is Tony, who you buy and presume it's automatic games, automatic goals. And then the other is Sesko or a similar type of profile that may take some time. But the advantage of Sesko over Tony is that both of them are going to be about the same fee because Sesko's release clause is increased because it was variable. And after he hit certain goal scoring targets, it's gone up from 50 million euros to about 65 million euros. So apologies that I can't convert accurately off the top of my head, but it's about 55 million quid for Sesko and it's about 50 million quid potentially for Tony. But Tony's wages are 250k a week and Sesko's wages would be half or less than half that. So financially speaking, Sesko, and because of his age and profile, might be seen as a better option.
I honestly think both options would be decent ones for Manchester United. I personally lean towards more of an experienced striker, and I think Tony, for if you could get him for under 50 million, which is a possibility, would be a brilliant deal in my opinion. But then again, Sesko's got so much potential, so young, you could have him for more years. But then we already have a young striker in Rasmus. It's an interesting one. And Ben, I'm disappointed that you can't convert euros to pounds off the top of your head. I mean, come on, come on. I'm joking. But last but not least, I want to ask you about the defence situation for Manchester United. Jared Branthwaite, so much talk on Jared Branthwaite right now, a little bit on Todibo as well, but mainly the price of Jared Branthwaite. We keep hearing different figures. I mean, what's your understanding on it?
The understanding was always that a price would be set at the end of the season based on what division Ipswich were in, and on top of that, financial consideration. Sorry, I think I said Ipswich were in instead of Everton were in. And the reason for that is because I'm distracted because I'm getting messages from sources saying that the contract extension for McKenna in Ipswich is now official as of a couple of minutes ago. So that's a bit of breaking news that we were speaking about earlier. So McKenna won't be in the frame therefore for Manchester United. But Everton were always going to set the price for Branthwaite once they knew what division they were in. And if they went down, there was something cut price to be done. But I think the price is going to be in excess of £70 million. And again, Manchester United may feel like they've got that budget, but if they go for Branthwaite, they're going to have to wait on Elise. And this is where the transfer business is collective financially. And if you get one, you have to wait and then work out how much money is left to get the other. But I think both Jean-Claude Todibo and Jared Branthwaite are concrete possibilities for Manchester United. And Jonathan Tah and Max Kilman are names that have been looked at in the past as well. Of those names, even though you might think it's easy to do business with Nice for Todibo because it's basically Ratcliffe negotiating with Ratcliffe, but you got to factor in it will have to be done at fair market valuation, otherwise the deal will come under scrutiny. So Manchester United see value in Branthwaite, but of the players I've mentioned, he's expected to have the highest price of all of them. So they would have to invest a large portion of their summer budget on Branthwaite and then work out how much other business they can do. And it's a waiting game and it's an outgoings game. But Branthwaite is firmly on the radar. The last time we spoke, I told you that there's two targets that have been fully endorsed by old regime and new regime. And it was Elise. And now there's two. Elise and Branthwaite. So I do expect Manchester United to be in the conversation for Branthwaite, but it's whether or not they can get him at value. And I don't see Manchester United paying in excess of 70 million. So it may be a case of them trying to drive the price down.
Yeah, it just depends because obviously I know Everton have financial difficulties at the moment, so maybe they would have to lower the price. But then if other clubs come into the race, you know, they can get a bidding war going. It'll be interesting. Branthwaite's obviously a top talent. I mean, on kind of raising money for that, do you see Harry Maguire potentially leaving United? Victor Lindelof maybe?
It's a possibility. I think they'll entertain offers for Aaron Wan-Bissaka. We know that Al Nassr tried before, so that's one to watch over the course of the coming weeks. I think with Maguire, they're never going to say no to an offer that's too good to turn down, but he's been outstanding this season and proved a lot of his critics wrong. So I don't think he's there on a list of transfer listed players. But what I would say is if the right offer comes in, then Manchester United, if it's the players' desire to go as well and get more regular first team football, if Manchester United say that his minutes are going to be further diminished, then yeah, that one can't be ruled out. And the same can be said for Scott McTominay as well. West Ham United still have an interest in Harry Maguire. And I'm told as well that Bayern, even though they signed Eric Dyer, might be a club to watch. But the thing about Bayern is this was all in Tuchel's era and before board upheaval. So everything's changing at Bayern and is very fluid, but they still may want another centre-back. So don't rule out that one as well, because I know that Vincent Kompany has a lot of respect for Harry Maguire, wants proven players. He said at interview that he wants older players. By old, we're not saying past it, but we're saying players maybe that will come on a 1 or a 2 year contract rather than a 3, 4, 5 year contract. So that's one to keep an eye on. But again, nothing has developed at the moment. Manchester United value Maguire. And the reason why Manchester United never just forced him out the door, and the reason why Manchester United were never disrespectful to Harry Maguire, is because even though he was stripped of the captaincy, what he offers off the field as well has always been highly valued within the football club.
Yeah, I think Harry Maguire's mental resilience has been brilliant. And to be honest with you, I think he's been really good this season. I really do. I think he stepped up to the plate in a lot of games for us. And personally, if a good offer came in, probably similar to the way Manchester United are thinking, I would opt to sell him. But at the same time, if he stays, I think he can be a decent squad player. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But if we're looking at bringing 1 or 2 centre-backs in, you know, you look at the centre-back situation for Man United, you'd think someone might have to shift out. I know Varane has gone, but it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Lastly, on the left-back situation, Ben, is there any names coming up on that at all at the minute for Manchester United? Because we know we are going to go for one. And just wondering if there's anyone that's kind of looking likely at the minute.
Not too many names at the moment. I'd mentioned in the last chat that we had Marc Cucurella, who has been excellent for Chelsea. I'm not so sure they'll want to sell him. No, but if you only look at Cucurella when he joined Chelsea, he was a £60 million player. And if you look at Cucurella in the last 10 games of this season, or roughly 10 games when he was utilised as an inverted fullback, he was outstanding. And that's probably why he'll end up staying at Chelsea now, but needs must with Chelsea and sales. So they might be prepared to do business. And with Cucurella, the interest obviously came from Manchester United before Reguilon, and they wanted him on a short-term deal, but with a break clause so they could return him to Chelsea in January, and that just wasn't something that Maurizio Pochettino was prepared to entertain, and he ended up playing Cucurella in a League Cup game, and then the deal never got done from there. The other profile that they're looking for is a little bit younger, and Milos Kirkos is a player that has been discussed internally and scouted and is doing very well in his development in Bournemouth, and Chelsea are another club looking at him as well. So it won't necessarily be a starting left back so much as a young, talented kind of profile that can bed in that first year or two and then start to get more regular minutes.
That sounds great, to be honest with you. I think we need someone who is going to be able to take the baton from Luke Shaw and eventually move up into being a starting left back for Manchester United, because it's been a problem position for us, to be honest with you, Ben. I mean, I want someone young, but I also want someone ready as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I know you've probably got a lot of messages to attend to with the Kieran McKenna news breaking. Just got a couple super chats to read out before I'll let you go. Kada Karma says, why are we not looking at free agents like Miranda for the left back and Diddy for CDM? and centre-back Kelly. I think Kelly's going to Newcastle, isn't he? Stephen Willock says, where's the FA Cup and Europa League earnings? I mean, in terms of the FA Cup and the Europa League and getting into the Europa League, that will give us a little bit more expenditure in the summer, won't it?
Yeah, a little bit. It's not a massive amount of money, but it's better than nothing. And certainly Europa League is better than Europa Conference League. So Champions League is what you want financially, but this is still very positive for Manchester United to bring in the money. The downside is you enter into UEFA financial fair play years, but they were ultimately already in that from the previous season anyway. So it won't be that much of a culture shock on the books, but to go from Champions League into Europa League is still not ideal. What I would say as well, just as an aside, is that Manchester United have got no huge concerns about the whole Nice Manchester United having to be demoted to the Conference League. They believe they'll be able to satisfy UEFA. So I fully expect Manchester United to play in the Europa League next season, not the Europa Conference League. And then free agents are certainly beneficial as far as being cost effective, but sometimes you have to pay for exactly the right fit that you're looking for. Lloyd Kelly, as you say, is in demand, and the expectation is he goes to Newcastle, but we can't rule out Tosin. Everyone thought that Tosin to Newcastle was a slam dunk, and as I reported, that was not my understanding, and Newcastle fans let me have it in the neck when I said that. And Newcastle are still pushing, and they may well get the player, but Manchester United are still in that conversation for Tosin. So let's see what happens over the coming days or weeks. But the door's not categorically and entirely shut that Tosin could end up moving to Manchester United instead of Newcastle, and that would be an example of a free transfer.
Yeah, I was literally just about to ask you on Tosin from Fulham, because I thought that would be one that Manchester United would be well in that race. So it's good to hear that we are still in them conversations. But look, Ben, thank you so much for coming on. Oh, quickly, a little bit of news before we went live that United could be in for Trevor Chalobah from Chelsea. Is there anything in that, do you know?
Well, Trevor Chalobah doesn't want to leave Chelsea. That's the first thing to say, but he may be forced out under the right circumstances. The valuation is 25 million, and Chalobah might see diminished game time under Enzo Maresca as things move forwards, because you're going to have Wesley Fofana fit, and Levi Colwell will likely partner him. You've got Axel Disasi, Benoit Badiashile. They might bring in another centre-back. They're considering whether to move for Tosin as well. And Chalobah can also play on the right-hand side, but you've got Reece James and Malo Gusto. So logically, even though he's been brilliant for Chelsea in the second half of last season, there may be less minutes for him. But he won't just leave for any old club. He wants a club that has European football. So Manchester United tick that box. And he wants a club that can match his Chelsea wage. And that will be the same for Manchester United as well. So on paper, it makes sense. And 25 million, to me anyway, feels like quite a steal in the current market for a player of his quality. But this is all about Chalobah, who's not desperate to leave Chelsea and is going to be incredibly picky with any suitors that come to the table. He wanted to go to Bayern 12 months ago, but a loan deal couldn't be agreed. Then Nottingham Forest had an offer accepted and Chalobah said no. So again, that's an example of him saying he's only going to move for the right club, for European football, for the right wage, and in his mind, the right city. And I think Manchester United do tick all of those boxes, and Chelsea do want to sell. So it might be one to watch. But again, think of this not only in terms of price and club to club, because Chalobah is going to be quite stubborn over his future. And given the way that he's finished the season, and given he's not yet had a new conversation with Enzo Maresca, who hasn't yet met him, and they haven't yet had any training sessions together, it might be one that waits for a few weeks into pre-season before we get any more clarity, because Chalobah is very methodical. He's very slow in his decision-making, and he won't just go because Chelsea say, we want you to go. He'll only go if it ticks all of the right boxes.
Look, Ben, thank you so much for all of them updates. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and hear your insight. Loving the new haircut as well. I did tell you that off camera, but we've had a lot of viewers saying that they're liking the new haircut. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, giving us your wonderful insight as always. And hopefully we'll get some news soon on the manager situation, and we can discuss more things in terms of transfers and United news going through the summer as well.
Look forward to it. Hope everyone has a good summer, and we'll speak soon.
Yes, Ben, thank you very much. And everyone at home as well, thank you for watching. Thank you for getting all your comments in. Make sure you hit a like on the video, and we will see you on the next one.